In the history of this world, there once existed a race that many believed was the next step in human evolution. They were stronger than humans, smarter than humans, and they possessed abilities capable of breaking the very laws of nature. They called themselves Aurelian. For thousands of years, the Aurelian lived in secrecy within a hidden city known as Attaris, completely separated from the human world. To them, humanity was merely a young civilization, chaotic, fragile, and full of mistakes. But everything began to change on the day a fateful decision was made. With a single action, the king of the Aurelian activated an ancient power, one that could awaken millions of people across Earth and transform them into new Aurelians. In that moment, he believed he was opening the door to a golden age for his kind. But he was wrong. Instead of bringing a renaissance, that decision ignited the most devastating war in the history of the planet, a war between those who believed they were born to rule and those who were willing to fight for their right to exist. And within just a few short years, an empire that had endured for thousands of years was nearly wiped out completely. This is the story of the rise and the fall of the Aurelian. To understand how a powerful civilization like the Aurelian could collapse so quickly, we have to go back in time, long before the war ever began. Thousands of years ago, when humanity was still struggling to build its first civilizations, another species already existed alongside them. They were the Aurelian descendants of an ancient genetic experiment conducted on Earth by an extraterrestrial civilization. Unlike humans, the Aurelian possessed the ability to control the evolution of their own bodies. Through a rare form of energy known as mist, every Aurelian who reached maturity could undergo a transformation ritual, awakening powers that were completely unique to them. Some could control the elements, others possessed intellect far beyond even the greatest human geniuses, and a few individuals carried abilities powerful enough to destroy an entire city. But that power also gave rise to a dangerous ideology. In Aurelian society, genetics meant power. Those with stronger abilities were seen as superior, and the royal family of Attaris believed they were born to lead, perhaps even to rule over other species. For centuries, they kept their existence hidden and stayed away from the human world. However, as disturbances in the cosmos began to spread toward Earth, the leaders of the Aurelian were forced to confront a question they had avoided for thousands of years. Should they continue to remain in the shadows? Or was it finally time to awaken their entire race across the planet? That question was finally answered on a day no one in Attaris would ever forget. After centuries of hiding, the Aurelian Royal Council began to believe that the age of secrecy was over. The human population was exploding, their technology was advancing rapidly, and individuals carrying dormant Aurelian genes had begun appearing across the planet. To many within the royal court, this was no longer a threat. It was an opportunity. King Archon, the ruler of Attaris, believed the destiny of his people was not to remain hidden in the shadows. In his eyes, the Aurelian were not created to live as forgotten legends. They were born to shape the future of the world. But to do that, they would first have to awaken the descendants who were sleeping among humanity. Deep beneath Attaris, in laboratories hidden far below the city, royal scientists had recreated an ancient device known as the LR bomb, a mechanism capable of releasing LR mist into Earth's global atmosphere. Just one activation, and millions of people carrying Aurelian blood would begin to transform. Some members of the royal council were uneasy. They understood that the power of LR mist was nearly impossible to control. But Archon believed this step was necessary. And then, in a single fateful moment, he gave the order to activate the device. Soon after, clouds of LR mist began spreading across the skies of Earth, ushering in a new era, or perhaps the greatest catastrophe in human history. At first, everything seemed to unfold exactly as King Archon had predicted. As the LR mist spread across Earth's skies, strange events began occurring all over the world. Ordinary people suddenly fell into deep comas, their bodies encased in strange cocoons of shimmering energy. Hours, sometimes days later, they awakened. But when they emerged from those cocoons, they were no longer the same humans they had once been. A young boy could control the wind with a simple wave of his hand. A woman could turn solid metal into dust with a single touch. Across the globe, new Aurelians began to appear. Inside Attaris, many started to believe that Archon had been right all along. Their race was spreading across the planet. A new era truly seemed to be beginning. But then, the first disturbing reports began to arrive. From regions where novice humans carrying mutated genes lived, mysterious deaths were being recorded. At first, it was only a few cases. Then dozens. Then hundreds. The scientists of Attaris quickly discovered the terrifying truth. LR mist didn't only awaken Aurelians. For the Novans, it was a lethal poison. That meant every cloud of LR mist drifting through the skies wasn't just awakening a new race, it was also slowly killing another one. And as this truth began to spread across the world, one thing became painfully clear. Archon hadn't just changed the fate of the planet. He had accidentally ignited a war. News of the LR mist spread faster than anything before it. At first, many people hoped it was simply a scientific error, a side effect that had not been fully studied. But as the number of Novans dying continued to rise, that hope quickly turned into rage. Novan communities across the world began to panic. Cities that had once served as safe havens for them suddenly became dangerous zones. All it took was a single cloud of Eller mist drifting overhead, and dozens could die within hours. For them, this was no longer an accident. This was a purge. Novan leaders soon reached what they believed was the only logical conclusion: the Aurelians had known the consequences from the very beginning. The Eller bomb was not a mistake, it was the first step in a plan to dominate the planet. And if they didn't act now, the Novans could soon be completely wiped out. Meanwhile, inside Attaris, the Aurelian royal family fell into deep division. Some members began to realize the scale of the catastrophe Archon's decision had unleashed. But it was already too late to stop it. The Eller mist had spread throughout the atmosphere. No one could take it back. As Novan forces began to mobilize and new alliances formed to oppose Attaris, the entire world slowly drifted toward a dangerous turning point. A war was coming, one not only between two races, but between two different beliefs about the right to exist on this planet. The war that so many had feared finally erupted. At first, it was only small clashes between Novan groups and newly awakened Aurelians. But very quickly the conflict spread into a global war. Major cities became battlefields, and the skies were filled with violent confrontations between individuals possessing powers far beyond anything humans had ever known. Soon, the Novans made their ultimate objective clear. Attaris, the secret city that had remained hidden for thousands of years, was finally discovered. Novan alliances, joined by several human nations, gathered their forces to strike at the very heart of Aurelian power. They believed that if Attaris were destroyed, the source of the catastrophe would finally come to an end. The final battle was far more brutal than anyone had imagined. Aurelian warriors fought desperately to defend their homeland. King Archon unleashed the terrifying extent of his power to hold the defensive lines. But their enemies were no longer scattered factions. It was the entire world standing against them. No matter how powerful they were, Attaris could not withstand the pressure coming from every direction. Defense systems collapsed one after another. Ancient energy towers were destroyed. The city, once believed to be invincible, began to tear apart piece by piece. When the battle was over, Attaris was left as nothing more than burning ruins. Thousands of years of Aurelian history, almost erased in a single day. And for the first time in their existence, the race that once believed itself superior to all others stood on the brink of extinction. For many months after the Battle of Attaris, the entire world believed that the story of the Aurelian had come to an end. The ruins of the ancient city were sealed off. Final reports from the battlefield all reached the same conclusion: most of the Aurelian royal family had disappeared during the collapse of Attaris. No leaders remained. No center of power survived. The race that had once made the entire planet tremble seemed to have been erased from history. The Novans declared victory. Many nations began dismantling the defense systems that had been built during the war. Slowly, the world returned to something resembling normal life, even though the scars of the conflict still remained. But there was one thing no one knew. In the final moments before Attaris collapsed completely, an ancient system had been activated, a hidden gateway designed for the most extreme emergency. And through that gateway, a small group escaped the planet. Far beyond Earth's orbit, drifting silently in the darkness of deep space, a massive ship moved through the void. Inside it were the last surviving members of the Aurelian royal bloodline. King Archon, Queen Serapha, and their most loyal warriors. They watched as the blue planet slowly faded in the distance behind them. Attaris was gone. But to Archon that did not mean defeat. It was only the beginning of a new plan, one greater, more dangerous, and far beyond Earth. Many years have passed since the fall of Attaris. On Earth, the war between the Aurelian and the Novans slowly faded into a dark chapter of history. Cities that had once been devastated were rebuilt, new alliances were formed, and most people came to believe that the Aurelian threat had completely disappeared. But out in the depths of space, that story never truly ended. The massive ship carrying the last survivors of the Aurelian royal family continued its silent journey among the stars. For years they wandered through distant star systems, searching for a place safe enough to begin again. And eventually, they found it. A barren planet rich with ancient energy, perfect for building a new Attaris. There King Archon began a bold new plan to rebuild the Aurelian race, create a civilization stronger than before, and prepare for the day they could return. But this time his ambition was not limited to Earth. He intended to build an empire among the stars. And as the first machines of the new Attaris began to awaken, Archon spoke only a single sentence to the survivors who stood beside him. "We may have lost our home, but we still have our future. The story of the Aurelian is not over. It has only begun again on a much larger scale. And if you want to know what will happen when the Aurelian finally return to Earth, comment 1 below.